Well, it is my pleasure today to introduce our next speaker for this session, Carolyn Witherspoon. Carolyn is a director in the law firm of Cross, Gunter, Witherspoon, and Gouches, who practices in the areas of labor and employment defense and transportation law. Carolyn represents public and private employers in employment-related matters, including Title VII litigation, and does extensive training to help employers avoid legal pitfalls. She is a frequent contributor to legal publications on topics involving employment and personnel issues. In 2013, Arkansas Governor Mike Beebe appointed her to the Commission on Uniform State Laws. She's a 2005 recipient of the Charles L. Carpenter Memorial Award from the Arkansas Bar Association and is listed among the top lawyers in the nation by Best Lawyers in America, Chambers USA, and Mid-South Super Lawyers. And Mid-South Super Lawyers, she is also listed in the top 50 list of attorneys in Arkansas. She has been named one of the best lawyers in Little Rock by the readers of Soiree magazine and Arkansas Business in 2012 and 2013, and was most recently included in AY Magazine's list of the most powerful women in Arkansas. So with that, I will turn it over to Carolyn.
Thank you, Ricky. First of all, I have the crud. So I sound a little bit like a frog, but not as badly as I sounded last week. And now my mother has it, so she's not happy with me. But I'm delighted to be here today and see so many of you that I've known for a long time. I'd like to take a special opportunity to introduce Sherry Maxey to everybody. Sherry, stand up. Sherry was my first right-hand person a long, long time ago, and she's just a great friend, and her mom was a client, and I'm so excited to see Sherry here today. So, thank you. So I was asked to speak a little bit about negotiating and about the fact that, can y'all hear me from here? That women are powerful negotiators. I would go up and down the steps, but invariably I'll fall. So I'll try not to do that. Lawyers are not only litigators, they're also advocates, mediators, negotiators. So talking to you a little bit about negotiations and negotiating skills is supposed to come naturally to me, but I look out on this audience and I think, I bet nobody in here needs a conversation or anything on negotiating, because I bet everyone out here does some sort of negotiating every day in your life, whether it's with the dry cleaners, in your job, with your spouse, with your kids, with your neighbors over a property line dispute. Is there anybody in here that hasn't negotiated at least one thing? Okay. So let me give you a couple of starting points. One is empathy. If you're going to be a successful negotiator, you must be able to empathize with the person or persons that you're with, that you're on the other side of. Empathy is about understanding other people's needs, not necessarily about giving them what they want, especially at the expense of getting what you want. And that's a quote from A Woman's Guide to Successful Negotiating, 2002, by Lee Miller. Another good point to remember as we talk today is we women know how to take care of everybody so well, but the one person that we've written out of that equation generally is us. So believe in yourself, negotiate yourself, and own your own success. And that's a quote from Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, from her book in 2013. And Sheryl also reminds us that people think that women don't negotiate because they're not good negotiators. But that's not it. Women don't negotiate because it doesn't work as well for them. Women have to say, I really add a lot of value, and it's in your interest to pay me more. I hate that advice. I really do. I want to see women get ahead. So how can you do that? Let's talk about that. First of all, why do you think negotiation is important? Do I have a volunteer from the audience about why? Yes, ma'am. Both sides win. Good point. Other suggestions on why negotiations is important? How about the fact that negotiation is a valuable skill that you can use really in every part of your life? Yes, both sides do win. Sometimes both people don't see it as a win, though. Effective negotiation can, however, be beneficial for all sides, one side, two sides, or more. And it is often considered enjoyable because you're getting to know the person on the other side, they're getting to know you, you're developing a positive working relationship, which is what it's all about. And the long-term benefits of that short-term relationship are just as important as the long-term benefits. So let's talk a little bit about some statistics on negotiation. These were eye-openers for me. Men initiate negotiations how many more times than women? Who can guess? Let me just have one hand in the audience. How many more times do men initiate, that is, begin negotiations before women will? 5? Anybody else? 20. 85%. 4 times more than women. 4 times. 58% versus blank percent of women negotiated their first job offer. Sherry? 58% versus what percent of women negotiated their first job offer? It's going to be embarrassing when you hear it. 2%, 5%, 12%, you're close. It's 7%. 7% of women negotiated their first job offer. So if there's anything that we learn today, it's to go home and teach our children, our cousins, our sisters, our friends, that they need to negotiate their first job offer so these statistics go up a little bit, because 7% is way low. Men describe negotiation as fun, like winning a ball game. Women are quoted in this Carnegie study by Linda Babcock, who's an economics professor. Women describe negotiations as painful, like going to the dentist, or scary. Now that just should not be. Women, on average, last negotiated 18 months ago to buy a car or a home. Men, on average, negotiated in the last 2 weeks to ask a colleague to support a project or ask their wife to pick up the kid. In the last 2 weeks. All right, so how many in here have negotiated something in the last 2 weeks? A bunch of you guys, but not the whole room. I bet if I were in a room full of men, everybody would raise their hand and say that they had negotiated something that very day. Just remember, getting the kid picked up from daycare or school is a negotiable item. Now here's another frightening statistic. Again, I'm quoting from Linda Babcock, this economics professor. Women on average ask for blank percent less money than males. Blank percent less money than males. Somebody over here. I heard 20 over here. 42. No, but it's in the middle. 30%. 30% less money than males. 2.5 times more women than men said they feel a great deal of apprehension about negotiations. All right, here is a really disgusting figure. Women ask for raises or promotion blank percent less often than their male counterparts' salary. Blank percent less often. 85%. 85, staggering. How is your child going to support you if they don't get up there and start asking for more money? I don't know about you, but right now my daughter couldn't afford to buy me anything at McDonald's. Another, I promise this will be last for a little bit. 20% of women say they never negotiate at all, although those same 20% of women recognize negotiation as appropriate and necessary, but they don't open their mouths. That is really discouraging. And this, again, is a study from Linda Babcock, who published this depressing study. Thank you, Linda. All right. Now, why don't women negotiate? Over here on this side. Can one person give me one reason why women don't negotiate? Yes, ma'am.
We get shut down.
We get shut down. Over here. So We don't feel like we can negotiate because we don't feel like we have power to go into it. So maybe today we'll talk a little bit about power. Yes, ma'am. Fear of rejection. Yes, I totally agree with that one. Fear of rejection. They fear that negotiating will damage a relationship. Now, do you think men think about that? No, exactly. Women don't like to be seen as confrontational. Oh, you know, she's so angry all the time. She's such a bee. But a lot of women don't negotiate because they fail to recognize negotiation opportunities. They don't know how to recognize the opportunity when they see it. A lot of women have learned that society, our society, can react badly to women who assert their needs, legitimate needs, and their legitimate desires. And they don't know how to negotiate. So how do you teach someone to negotiate? It starts in the sandbox or before. You got to realize that what they're doing in the sandbox on the playground is all part of developing a negotiating skill that you've got to help prod people along. They're socialized, a lot of women are socialized as girls to take what they get and be thankful for it. And I can just hear my mom, just take what you've got and be thankful for that. And they lack the personal and professional networks that they need to succeed in negotiating. And we all know how important those networks are. A lot of women perceive that their circumstances are more fixed. They're more absolute, thus less negotiable. Would you all agree with that? You see your circumstances or have seen your circumstances at times as I can't negotiate myself out of this box. How do I get out of this box? But most importantly, what do you think the most important reason is that women don't negotiate? They don't ask. They don't ever start. If you can just make that little bitty first baby step, you're on your way. It just takes a moment to get there. And in general, women just don't ask for things. And when they do, they sometimes get less than what they've asked for. But we all know about that. Let's ask for more than what we really want. That's part of my negotiating skill. It is part of mine. I ask for more than I want, and then I know that my goal is going to be right here, but I'm going to ask for the moon. So I'll be happy when I get this one. All right, so there's some people out there that have written on this about negotiating women. Carol Frolinger says, don't bargain yourself down before you get to the table. So how do you prepare yourself for negotiating? Anybody have a suggestion? First suggestion on how do you prepare yourself for negotiating? Research. How you got to learn the issues. If you don't know the issues, you can't play the game. If you don't play the game, you'll never get anywhere. So you've got to take that baby step. But before you do, research. You don't think your husband, ex-husband, boyfriend hadn't researched what time you need to be home tonight? So they already know who's going to pick up the kid at daycare or after school care. They've already gotten there 2 leaps before you've even started down there. So, yes, be aware, first of all, of your issue by researching what you need to know about it. Secondly, learn about the process itself. Every negotiating situation is different. Whether you're negotiating for the termite control on your house, the ruined blouse at the dry cleaners, the dent in your car when someone's backed into it and only wants to pay you a certain amount of money for it, which is less than the repair value. All of those things are negotiating in real life. They're not just what I do every day for a living, which is negotiating a settlement or negotiating a severance package. So you've got to be aware of what the issue is first and then learn the ground rules for this negotiating process. Now, for instance, in a lot of negotiations, it's one offer and that's all you're going to get. But in other situations, it's going to be a true several hour, several phone calls, several written letters back and forth negotiation. And you've got to know about what that process is before you enter into it, because you've got to be playing at the same level as the other side, regardless of who that is, whether it's at work, in your personal life. Again, negotiating repairs on your home from the termite damages, negotiating with the dry cleaners that's ruined your blouse. Third step, overcome your fears, which is the hardest thing to do. And how can you do that? Practice. Get in front of the mirror. Practice until you become comfortable and confident. Get your mom to help you. Get your next door neighbor. Get your best friend. Get somebody over the phone to help you do some role playing. If it's that important, it's, practice makes perfect. So I recommend practicing. Practice on what you want your points to be and have the other side play devil's advocate. And you've got friends that can do that for you. We all do. The fourth point is, and most importantly, be able to figure out how to get past the moment of discomfort. That moment that we all have when we're going to be uncomfortable. We're going to say, never mind, let's start all over again. I'll just take $5,000 instead of the $100 that you asked for. So get over that moment of discomfort. You've got to be able to do that, and that's what your friend can help you with when you're practicing, is help you get over that moment of discomfort. Use your female advantage to your advantage. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily. I don't know if he's recording or not back there. I'm just talking about your abilities to focus on cooperation and relationship building. You're all good at that. Most women are very good at relationship building, relationship forming, cooperation, and that can be your best advantage in negotiation. It may be how you sit, what you wear, how you introduce yourself. All of those can help you use it to your advantage. It's the best thing you can do going into negotiations. So, all right, we've talked about the importance of homework. So you've done your homework. You understand what's on the opposite side. You're negotiating buying a house, and there's no real estate agent involved, so you're going to be sitting down with the homeowner. You want to buy the house. So what is your goal? Your goal is to buy the house at a price that you can afford that's not going to bankrupt you. So what are you going to do to prepare for the negotiations? Well, you know how much they want for the house, but you're going to do your homework. You're going to find out about other houses in the area, in the neighborhood, in the surrounding neighborhoods. You're going to find out the size of those houses, how much they paid for those houses, whether you're going to drive around the neighborhood and see how the house that you want compares to the houses that have sold. You're going to collect all that data, and you're going to come up with the price that you want to pay for that house. You're going to look at renovations that need to be done because you're going to do your homework. Before you make an offer, you're going to look at the yard. You're going to see if there's a sprinkler system. You're going to ask to see their water bills, their electric bills, the gas bills. You're going to look at the roof or get somebody to look at the roof. You're going to go up in the attic. You're going to go down in the basement. You're going to ask about leaks. You're going to do your homework. You're going to collect the data. You're going to ask them if there have been any termites. You'll get a termite inspection, of course, because if you don't, it'll be termite ridden for sure. And you're going to get all this data together, and you're going to be prepared. You're going to put it in a nice, organized book so you know exactly what you're doing. And then you're going to be prepared to compromise because obviously you're not going to get your dream house for $50,000. So you're going to have to be ready to compromise, and you're going to know where your upper limit is. And you're going to understand that you can use your knowledge in the negotiations. Well, I don't want to sell my house for $50,000, but it's a reasonable value. Yeah, but my neighbor sold their house for $235,000. Yes, but their house was, because you've researched it, 3 stories, has a swimming pool, a fenced-in backyard, and an alarm system. Your house is 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1950 kitchen, and has a no fenced-in backyard for my 3 dogs that need to move into the house. So you're going to understand your homework, you're going to use that, and you're going to use that knowledge in your power of negotiation. And then you're going to do your own negotiation. You don't need anybody else necessarily to do that for you. Susie Orman, who wrote Women and Money, Owning the Power to Control Your Destiny, says, it's impossible to map out a route to your destination if you don't know where you're starting from. So you've got to know how much the value of that house is, the size of that house. You've got to know about those comparables before you go in there and start your negotiations. Also, before you go in there and start negotiation, you've got a list of your goals and your trade-offs. Well, I want you to close on the house in 2 weeks. Well, I can't close on the house in 2 weeks. I can close on the house in a month, and I'll give you more earnest money to show my good faith. That's going to be one of your trade-offs. You're going to create an agenda for yourself. If you don't get the offer that you want, you're going to stop. You're going to go back. You're going to say, I'm going to think about this, and I'll give you a call tomorrow at noon, or let's meet tomorrow and discuss it some more. You're going to consider what matters to the person. Oh, I want all the appliances to go with the house. No, I've got to keep that refrigerator. It was my great-grandmother's. Oh, let them keep the refrigerator. You don't want a refrigerator that old anyway. So you've got to know what matters to the other person in order to be able to trade off with that person for what you want. And before you have gone out there negotiating, you will have practiced with your friend, your parent, the mirror, your child, or the dog. You will have practiced what you're going to have said during the negotiations. Now, does everybody in here recognize that power struggles are a natural part of the negotiation process? I mean, they are. It's important. It's ingrained. It's part of our DNA. So it's very important before you go down and start negotiating that you realize how your power is projected, whether that's wearing, the blue suit with the red blouse or the red suit with the blue blouse or what shoes. You've got to be comfortable with what power you're going to project. I think there is something to still be said for blue and red. Everybody seems to recognize that still, and it's, wearing the power suit can be part of that negotiations. And I think it's instructive to see what do you feel the best in, to put your best foot forward so that you can think about, well, what are you going to wear to feel the most powerful? And so if it takes wearing the red suit or the blue suit with the vice versa top, do it. If it takes wearing polka dots and a big bow, do it. It's whatever you feel best in. Of course, the other side may not take you quite as seriously if you come in with a big floppy bow, but it just depends on your homework, because you will have done your homework to see how the other side is going to react and what the other side is going to say or do. Excuse me. So, power struggles are all natural and all are a natural part of the negotiation process, as is setting your agenda for the negotiations and that positive aura that you're going to spread. So recognize how you're going to want to project your power before you go into the setting. Outfit yourself to project the power and start being positive. Don't go in slumped over. How many times have I told my daughter when she was growing up, stand up straight. You're never going to get anybody to take you seriously if you don't stand up straight and look somebody in the eye. And it's true. We all understand the importance of eye contact, good posture, showing that you're comfortable with yourself, you're comfortable with your position, and you're comfortable with knowing that they know, you know, already what they know. In other words, you've got to make them think that you know everything they already know. That way you can frame what you want the negotiation process to look like. And one of the most important things that you can do is, after you've collected your data, done your homework, set your outline out, is to project that confidence through what you wear, how you talk, how you stand, how you use eye contact. If you're uncomfortable making eye contact, I tell people when they're giving a speech or making a presentation, find a dot on the back wall over somebody's head and stare at the dot. Everybody in the room will think you're looking at them, but look at the dot if you're not comfortable making eye contact with somebody. Okay, I'm looking at the dot over somebody's head. Does it look like I'm making eye contact? Yes, but I'm not. I was looking at the dot on the back of the wall. So if you're not comfortable for a while making eye contact, and of course you practice this with your friend, your dog, your neighbor, your sister, your kid, then find a dot on the back of the wall when you're making that conversation with someone. And it's hard to do that when you're one-on-one, but if you've got a group of people or even 3 or 4 people, you can move your head around and look at those dots, and they're going to think that you're making eye contact with them. And that gives you a position of power. Be able to frame and reframe your issue. I really like your house. You've done an amazing job in the kitchen with that 1942 refrigerator. I still think my $50,000 offer is a fair price because I'm going to have to pay $50,000 just to update the pink linoleum. So you've got to reframe your issue in a way that they're going to understand, but not devalue them, particularly once you find out they love that pink linoleum. One of the most important things in negotiation is what? Utilizing silence. Silence. I'm a motor mouth. I hate that there's a void in a conversation. I always feel like I've got to fill the void. And there's a lot of power in silence. So one of the most important things you can do during your negotiation after you've introduced yourself, established your posture, made your opening remarks is utilize the silence. When they start off on $50,000 is just not enough, I'll never be able to buy another house. I won't be able to support myself. I'll be out on the street. I won't be able to replace my pink linoleum in the kitchen. Just let it be silence. It's okay, because they're going to start wanting to fill the void too, and then they're going to start backstepping. Well, maybe $50,000 isn't so bad after all. But you've utilized that power. So if you have to pinch your cheek to keep yourself from talking, or you've got a snappy rubber band on your wrist, as long as it's not showing that you're popping it every 2 seconds. But just find a way to control your nervousness, and none of that, because boy, I can spot that in negotiations. If somebody's doing this tap, 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 I know they're either wanting to get out of the room, they're uncomfortable with their position, they have something they're afraid of that's going to come out, and I use that to my advantage. You might look down, and they're tapping that foot. And they're going to be rigid. But you don't have to say anything because you're going to use your power of silence, which is so very hard. And don't pick at your cuticles. That's just so disturbing. Or your lip. I've got a granddaughter that picks at her lip all the time, and I just want to slap her. So don't pick. Learn to control yourself. So those are some positive tactics and some negative ones. Now, some people use negotiations to build negative coalitions. That wouldn't be so much in a house buying negotiations, but usually it's, if you don't do it my way, then just get on down the highway. And that's another negativism, and sometimes that might work in negotiations, sometimes it won't. Some people use emotionally charged responses to negotiate themselves into the position that they want. That's hard for me. I have a hard time doing a lot of negativism during my negotiations. And it's important if you're negotiating on behalf of someone else that you take control of the negotiations from that person and say, I'll be doing the negotiations so that they don't start interjecting. I recommend focus on the positive aspects of what you can do, what you can bring to the table to succeed for what you want to succeed for. Here's some other tips. Try to separate the issues from the people, which is hard if you're negotiating a divorce settlement or child custody. But if it's an inanimate object like a house or a car, try to separate that woman from her grandmother's refrigerator. So she doesn't have that emotionalism built into what it is that she wants to hold on to. Please remember to shut up and listen to the other side. They have value in what they're saying, and you've got to recognize that value. You're not giving them your power, but you're giving them your understanding and building a coalition with that person to achieve what you want to achieve. Don't ever be afraid to ask for what you want, because by God, if you don't ask for it, you're never going to get it. And that means the moon. Ask for the moon. You'll never get the moon if you don't ask for it. Remember what I said about setting the upper boundaries or the outer reaches of space, as Captain Kirk would say? Always be willing to walk away once you've reached your limit. Don't just, oh my God, I can't live without this house. Here's $255,000 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. Don't be afraid to walk away. And if you've built some goodwill and you've built some trust with the person you're negotiating with, you will have gained a friend, or at least you've gained some respect from someone, so it won't be a waste. One of the things that I have trouble doing is over-empathizing with the other person. Sometimes I want to jump in there and help that person out. That's just all part of my, everything's got to be under my control. So if you start trying to over-empathize with them, particularly if they have a bad negotiator on the other side, you by God, don't give it up. Don't fall into that routine, and don't over-empathize with the person on the other side, or you'll give up everything you're trying to gain. Always be prepared to compromise. That's that's just a human skill. We'd have less wars if we had more compromises. But don't give everything away. Don't make too many concessions too quickly or too willingly. And when you give up something, try to do it gracefully and professionally. Always shake the person's hand. I cannot tell you, as you know, I practice in the employment area. I can't tell you how many plaintiffs I've had on the other side of the table who are angry at their employer or their former employer, and the reason they're angry was simply a recognition issue, a handshake when they walked out the door, eye contact when they were being fired, when they're suspended, there was nobody that would look up from the table. They were all looking down and not recognizing that the person is a human being. So please try to be pleasant and remember that your atmosphere, the atmosphere that you set during negotiations is going to follow you whether you're successful or not. Never be in a hurry to get what you want. As Mother always says, patience is a virtue. And it's true. Patience is a virtue, and it's very critical in successful negotiations. Always listen carefully to what the other person says. They're signaling to you what they want or what is important in the negotiations. And when you're listening, because you're letting that silence fill the room and you're breathing deeply and you're not twitching your lip, you're listening, and you're going to uncover ulterior motives. You're going to uncover what those hidden agendas are, and you're going to uncover preconceived notions that they either have about you or the person that you're negotiating on behalf of. Respect the other person's power as you respect your own. If you don't stand up straight, make eye contact, do what you need to do in negotiations, that person on the other side isn't going to respect you either. So if you can't get their respect, how are you going to get their attention to give you what you want as part of the negotiations? Focus when you're negotiating on the other side's pressure points. You know what they are. They want that stupid refrigerator, or they want the drapes, or they want a little more money. So focus on what those pressure points are. And remember, because you've already done your homework, so you know what you can give and not give up, you're going to focus on those pressure points, and you'll know what to give and what not to give. Remember to argue what your interests are and not what your position is, because there's a difference. Your interest is you want to buy the house, or you want to have your house repaired, or you want to have your dent fixed in your vehicle. That's what your interest is. That's not your position. Your position is how much you're going to pay for it or how much you're willing to give up. Now, part of that silence is golden issue is also allows you to monitor what's going on. Okay, they've just shifted their position. They no longer care so much about the $225,000. They've come down to $180,000. She wants the refrigerator. I can give that refrigerator up in a New York minute. I'm willing to give another $10,000. So that silence is part of your monitoring process. Your computer in your mind is going off and allowing you to reach another point where you can go onward and upward in the negotiations. As I mentioned earlier, if you aren't successful, end it gracefully, be able to walk away, and be able to shake hands with the person and conclude the negotiations on a mature note. No guns blazing, that's not going to get you anywhere. Now, if your goal is critically important, if you really want that house, if you really want your car fixed, ask to discuss it with someone else. Have you all seen that, I think it's an AT&T ad where the guy goes in and he wants some phone service, he's talking to a woman, and he says, well, I can tell I'm not getting anywhere with you, I need to speak to the manager. And she says, well, I am the manager. And he just keeps talking. But if your goal is important and you're not getting anywhere with this person, ask to discuss it with somebody else. Don't, for God's sakes, ask for the manager, though. Well, is there someone else in your organization that I might speak with that might have some ideas that we could explore? Or is there a customer service person that we might be able to discuss this with together? Just, pull that out only if you need it, because it's going to be really demoralizing to the person that you've been working with. Be sure and thank that person for their time, their willingness to hear you out. Now, from a legal standpoint, I have a few other recommendations for settlement negotiations for those of you in here. I know there's a few lawyers in here. And that is, figure out who your client is. Is your client the person, or is your client an entity? Is the client your insurance carrier? Ask the person that you're representing, well, what are your goals? Is it a current employee that you're negotiating a severance package for? Is it an applicant? Is it a former employee who wants to come back to work? Is a lawyer even involved in the first place? Because if a lawyer's involved, then your whole strategy changes and the box switches shapes. In a workplace situation, which is what I do 24/7, I have to look at whether non-compete agreements are involved and how that settlement negotiation is going to impact those non-compete agreements. You also have to look at confidentiality agreements, and is there a consulting agreement possible throughout this negotiation? I have to inform my clients what I can't settle. No matter what agreement we reach, there are certain laws that I can't require the person give up, whether that might be a workers' compensation claim, unless you're in a workers' comp hearing, or a Fair Labor Standards Act, an overtime issue, or I can't make somebody give up future claims. Now, for lawyers, in addition, in negotiations, we've got to be concerned, not only are we going to get what our client wants, but we've got to be concerned about malpractice claims. So that's another reason that in negotiations, you always keep your client informed. Whether you're a real estate person, you've got to keep your client informed. You're a buyer, you're a seller. Lawyer, you've got to keep your client informed, no matter whether you're a plaintiff or a defendant. You're an engineer, you've got to keep your client informed. Regardless of who you are, if you've got another person involved, you've got to keep that person informed. And remember that you can't keep a lawyer from representing somebody, so you can do the negotiations yourself without a lawyer, but you can't keep somebody from getting a lawyer. So there are lots of things to think about from a legal standpoint in negotiations, at least from my standpoint. Return to work issues, money issues, tax issues, non-compete issues, neutral reference issues. If you've got people coming back into the workplace, or they're staying and they're going to go to work somewhere else, you've got to think about that. You've got to think about, what's the file going to look like? Is it confidential? If you're a governmental entity, you've got to think about the Freedom of Information Act, because that impacts all negotiations. Most importantly, for legal negotiations, just like anything else, you have to do your research. You have to know where to start, when to start, how to be the most effective with the dollar, how to be the most effective without money being involved, and never draw the line in the sand unless you're, by God, going to stand where the line is drawn. And for lawyers, for those of us who are lawyers, we've got to always worry about the model rules of professional conduct, so we can't undercut, overcut, slice somebody's throat up, because that would be unprofessional under our own rules. So just some closing thoughts, and then I'll take questions. Negotiations works anywhere. It works in Ireland. It could work in Iraq. It could work in Iran. It can work here in the United States, and it does work every day. You may not always get what you want, but you'll never get what you want if you don't ask. And it's unlikely you'll ever get what you want if you don't try. Remember that negotiation always requires preparation, preparation, preparation. There can't be too much of it. negotiation always improves with practice. So if you practice with your dog, you practice with your child, you practice with your friend or your neighbor, you're just going to be stronger when you get to the next step. Even if it's not the real thing, I mean, you could always move up from the dog to the neighbor before you get to the real negotiations. And last but not least, a smile, eye contact, and a handshake go a long way towards success in negotiations. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to take them at this point. Thank you. Questions? Comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Carolyn. Lori Garza. I work in Arkansas Legal Cooperatives, and I've bought and sold a house in the last 6 months. I've sold a car in the last 6 months. I've done a lot of negotiations. My kid goes to daycare, so I've done all that. What I want to know is when the balance of power isn't even, because when you're buying and selling a house, you're relatively even. When I'm trying to negotiate with my boss, for example, for a salary, that's what I would like to insist on. Is when you're dealing with someone who has more power than you do, who has more knowledge than you, I have no idea how much time is available to give me a pay increase or to give me a promotion. So when I'm dealing with someone who has a lot more power and information than I have no way to access that.
Okay, so the question deals with if you don't have access or the ability to access all the information to prepare yourself for negotiation for salary increase, what can you do? Well, there's always gossip in the office. Somebody there is going to know how raises are handled, whether there's no reason to go in and ask for more than 2% because that's all we've been getting for the past 5 years. Someone's going to know that. A lot of information can be gleaned on the website. You can certainly find out information like that from former employees, whether they left on good terms or bad terms, as long as they're a friend of yours and they don't have a confidentiality agreement, they can give you some information too. Don't be afraid to go to HR, although sometimes HR is the direct conduit to the boss. But, you know, I would be impressed if somebody came to me and said, well, so-and-so's been to me and asked me a lot of information. I'd think, well, that person's doing their homework. So you go to HR and you say, look, I'm getting ready to meet with so-and-so, the boss, to discuss my performance evaluation and my upcoming raise. What can you tell me about A, B, and C? And have a list of what are the usual raises, what do they look like, how long do you go between raises? Are they merely step increases? Is it dependent on, you know, bringing in business or 100% attendance rating? Find out what the ground rules are from someone else and do it in a professional way so that if that gets back to the boss, that person knows you're just doing your homework. So that's one idea. And secondly is the idea of looking around to see if you can tell what other people have done and what other people have gotten. You know, if there's somebody who's had a lot of tenure with your company, they've been very successful, use that person as a role model. Go to that person and say, look, you've been around a while. Can you give me some tips? How do you ask for this? How did you do that? And remember, as long as you're professional, there's no harm in asking. And certainly no harm in asking the boss, well, I don't know what the ground rules are on asking for a raise, but I know that this is what I've accomplished this past year, and these are what my goals and expectations are for 2014 and 15, and therefore, based on that, you know, I'd like a humongous raise. And be professional, and, you know, all you're going to do is get told yes or no, handshake, smile, you're out the door. Does that help? Any other questions from this side of the room? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, the power of silence. So what she said was men are very good at taking control of a room with silence. And I think that's true in a lot of instances. So that's why that's a really big skill to learn to do. Again, it's really hard if you're somebody like me who wants to fill the void, who wants to control every single option, and you feel like you're not in control if you're not filling that option. But really, in retrospect, you're losing control when you're trying to fill everything. Yes, ma'am.
So at times we find ourselves in a position where we may not be uncomfortable with negotiation. In fact, we might be good at it. But we have others that will have to negotiate on our behalf that may not be as good or qualified as we'd like them to be.
So the question was, you've got somebody who's going to be negotiating on your behalf, and they're not really as skilled at negotiations as you would like for them to be. How can you help that person? Pretty easy. Sit down with them, go, I know you're going in to do A, B, and C tomorrow, so I thought maybe I'd give you a couple of my thoughts if you don't mind, and draw back a little bit, and here's some of my thoughts. What are your thoughts on that? And try to get them to open up and make sure they're prepared. That's really hard. Yes, ma'am. Can asking for too much of an increase at your position hurt you? What do y'all think? Oh, I got some head shakers saying yes. I don't know. It depends on the kind of job you're in. And as long as you don't grovel around about it, like, well, hate to ask for this, but would you mind giving me $1 an hour increase?
If I'm working and I put a certain salary, and I was asked later, why did I put so much? How do you handle it?
I think that I have a lot of value that I would bring to your organization, and I'm recognizing what that value would be. You could always put what you like and then put negotiable in the blank. Anybody else have any suggestions for her other than that? That would work. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Sure. Cheap shots are on the other side being taken and lobbed at you regularly. First, you've got a pad. You've got your pad, and you're going to flip over a couple of pages. And with your pen, you're going to start drawing a picture of that person, but really small so they can't see it. And then you're going to let your silence fill the room, but in the meantime, you won't forget that person's picture, and they look really nerdy in your picture. So you've given yourself some power because you've taken control of the situation, you've taken the silence, and you've drawn a really bad picture of that person, which you're going to gloat over later, and you know you are. So then you're going to close the paper back and take your... I've listened to what you've said, and, I really don't recognize that, or I don't believe that's correct, or I don't find this to be a productive way for us to discuss this issue. So if you don't mind, let's move on to topic B. It's just one way. Yeah, don't get into, unless you're going to really have a good time, don't get into what they want to do. If that's what you came in there for, I don't see that would be productive, though. Don't fight over the Tupperware in the divorce. Or the bath mats. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Senator.
My question is kind of a macro type question, because I think so much of what happens to women is about when we centralize it to pay check. And I just want your perspective on it. I've worked in a lot of states, and I found that in states where bargaining and negotiation is a right for people in general, and that they are not afraid of it, and they don't think needs from the work that they're having. In those areas, socialize people to stand up for their rights. As a European myself, that I just love, is to socialize for their rights. I find that women tend to be more like of a leading
I've never really thought of that, but that's real interesting. I think a lot about backgrounds of people when they come into the negotiation table and sit down and start into negotiations. And I've observed a lot of negotiations of people in other countries and in other states. I always thought of that as their background and not about their outside influences that may have influenced them. But I'm going to think about that. That's a really great observation. And I think probably that's true, because you see how people come from different homes, and their different cultural background from their upbringing. And so why wouldn't that also, that impact of a unionized workforce, have some play on how they negotiate or develop their negotiation skills? Thank you for sharing that. Yes, ma'am. Because assertive is not a bad word. Assertive is a really good word. And if you think about it as, instead of saying I had to be assertive, say I was fortunate enough to be assertive. That'll help you along. Yes, ma'am. Well, the question is, do you feel like you can be more assertive or effective in negotiations over the phone versus in person? Yeah, it's easy to do it over the phone because you don't have to really worry about what you're wearing or whether you've got your shoes on, or you can roll your eyes when the other person proposes something. So I guess from that standpoint, I'm not sure how much more effective it is to do it. I guess it just depends on the subject. I sometimes think in-person negotiations is more effective if you've got people on the other side, not you so much, but other people who need to have that eye contact or that one-on-one, like, almost the tactile feeling, that might be more effective than doing it over the phone. But, I still like to read library books too. So, kind of old-fashioned. Yes, ma'am. You, right there. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Could you stand up a little bit? Thank you.
My question is, at one point you start negotiations, in my position, I think you get more and more work. Before you say, well, before I take on that more work, should I be compensated for it? Or you start doing the work and then go, I'm doing all this extra work, and I think I need to be compensated. Should you do it before you accept doing the extra work or after it's over?
That's going to require homework before I can answer that. I've got to know what's the past practice been at your company. Is when you say more work, is this like more difficult projects, or is it just more projects of the same kind? Have there been other changes that have impacted your work role in some way? Maybe somebody's left, or the company's downsizing and everyone's expected to take on more work? Because if that's the case, you're going to be kind of out of luck for getting more money. You're just doubling up.
What my situation is I'm in a very small office, and we keep looking at new and more and different things to do, and instead of hiring more people to help with the extra work, it's like, oh, we can do that, and oh, you can do that.
Yeah.
You can stay late tomorrow and finish that.
So then this is now the time where you go to your boss and say, look, I've thought about this and I'm really have enjoyed this challenge that you've given me to do the XYC contract, but I can't finish ABC if I'm working on XYZ. So what do you think we ought to do? Silence while they're thinking about the fact that they really just want to go out and have a drink after work, and now you've brought this uncomfortable topic up to them. And you could then say, oh, I see I've caught you off guard. Why don't you think about it a little bit and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Made some bonus points right there because they're quickly getting to the bar and having that beer. You got to put all of us need to have a monetary value on our time. Our time is it. So you've got to figure out what that is, whether you're making $10 an hour or $200 an hour. There's a monetary value on your time away from your family or to just be yourself. And you've got to put some value on that. And sometimes it's not worth the extra money if you're going to be working 60 hours a week. That may not be the solution. The solution may be in the short run, I'm willing to do this. We're all willing to do this, but I see burnout coming at the end of 6 months. And so let's look at some options that are going to make sure we don't all burn out here and that it gets done effectively. I don't know. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you have to learn to say no. It is when I told you to get that legal pad out and draw that picture, instead yours should have the big N-O on it. N-O, no. Answer's no. Can you do this? No. Please? No. You just have to learn to say no. There's a skill to that. Yeah, that's a whole nother presentation, learning to say no. Yes, ma'am.
Where can I sign up for that school of no?
I don't know. Sorry. Okay, well, y'all, it's our time. We're already running over, so I should have said no to that last question. I've enjoyed the opportunity, and thank you all very much.